Alrighty, it is noon and we are recording. Hello and welcome back to Welty at Home, the slow reading virtual book club that alternates works by Eudora Welty with works by authors connected to Welty. Today we are continuing to explore Ann Patchett's Tom Lake. During this series, we have read and discussed about 40 pages each week. As a reminder, we will be having a brief fall break, not next week, but the following week on October 20th. I am Anna Traylor, the Special Projects Coordinator at Eudora Welty House and Garden, and we are grateful to Suzanne Mars, Eudora Welty's friend and biographer and Professor Emerita of Millsaps College, for guiding these discussions. First, some quick housekeeping. To comment or ask a question, click the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and select raise hand. If you are on a tablet or a phone screen, you may have to tap the screen for this option to appear. And a lively discussion often takes place in the chat, so be sure to glance at that chat box every now and again. And I collect the weekly chat transcripts to share at the end of the series, but if you would like a progress copy before the series is complete, you can send an email to info@eudoraweltyhouse.com. So with that, Suzanne, where shall we begin today's discussion?
All right. Well, I thought I would begin just by saying a little bit about our town because we're on stage during our town here at the beginning of this. So, at the beginning of Act 3 in our town, these are the stage directions. During the intermission, the audience has seen the stagehands arranging the stage. On the right-hand side, a little to the right of center, 10 or 12 ordinary chairs have been placed in 3 openly spaced rows facing the audience. These are graves in the cemetery. Toward the end of the intermission, the actors enter and take their places. The front row contains, toward the center of the stage, an empty chair, then Mrs. Gibbs, Simon Stimson. The second row contains, among others, Mrs. Soames. The third row has Wally Webb. So that's an important thing for us to be thinking about as Uncle Wallace grasps Laura and goes over to sit down with the dead. The other thing is that in Act 3, Emily leaves the past and returns with the stage manager to the present, going back in time, and realizes how little the living appreciate the experiences they are having. And then at the end, the stage manager says these lines, which are evoked as well. The stage manager says, "There are the stars doing their old crisscross journeys in the sky. Scholars haven't settled the matter yet, but they seem to think that there are no living beings up there, just chalk or fire. Only this one is straining away all the time to make something of itself. The strain so bad that every 16 hours everybody lies down and gets a rest." So those are the lines that Laura says are so beautifully delivered by Uncle Wallace. So chapters 13, 14, and 15, which I think are asking us to examine issues of responsibility and mortality and mystery. And so let's start by talking about chapter 13. Anyone want to start us off with anything in chapter 13? Begins on stage during our town. Uncle Wallace in not such a great way, and a disaster happens. So what about this chapter? Anyone want to start us off? Cheryl.
Just because you said responsibility, thinking of Laura's kind of like survivor guilt, even though Uncle Wallace didn't die at this point, and then the personal responsibility that she feels as if she should have done something, but what could she have done? But then there's also the bystander effect where people should step in and do something and they don't. So there's 2 aspects of that to look at.
Yeah, how Laura cast herself as responsible. Is she responsible here? What's going on with this whole issue? Duke says, you couldn't have done anything. He has to take responsibility for himself. It's not you.
If we,
Harry.
oh, Go ahead,
Oh,
Harry.
Go Cheryl
I was
first,
just
and
going to say,
then
if we look at the setting of the 1980s, I don't know how much of the nature of addiction was understood, the psychological component
Mhm.
and the chemical dependency component. So there's only so much she could have done anyway as an individual and not a
All
medical
right.
professional.
Yeah, Harriet.
Um, I think there's a question of responsibility, responsible to what? That is, the decision is made to be responsible to the performance, and the performance in some ways is better than it's ever been because they are facing death um, and um, and um, and Laura thinks, why did we do this, both of us? Why didn't we simply pass the row of chairs and keep walking? Um, in a sold out house of 400, some percentage of the audience were bound to have been doctors. We were all in it. Now, whatever was happening, we were all in it now. Um, and there is um, that sense um, of responsibility to the performance, to the art. I think we've been talking about art versus life, um, uh, and um, and I think um, that Uncle Wallace is set up, or Albert Long is set up as a kind of seg um, into Duke in these chapters. Um, but but I am thinking um, about how um, how much Lara regrets um, the choice that she made at the time. Um, and I'm also thinking about self-destructive star culture in this period. And the, Cheryl, is pointing us to that we understood addiction differently, but we also had a whole series of stars that it seemed to be part of the culture to self-destruct. I still regret Janis Joplin. I think we got Uncle Wallace, who's had a balloon in his esophagus and cirrhosis, but he still keeps drinking. So I think we're looking at a couple things here. Bill's got his hand up.
There is the cliche, the show must go on. On the other hand, somebody is with you is clearly in some sort of distress, but you don't know at that point what that distress is. I mean, I think, in a way, Laura is casting herself as a major character when she's not. Uncle Wallace is the central character here, and maybe she's trying to take on too
Well,
much responsibility. But I do think it points to the issue with Duke, which is another issue, I think.
yeah, that is Duke's argument. Duke says Albert Long was teaching you a lesson you'd be wise to learn. You can't save them that won't save themselves. And of course, we think about how that maybe applies to Duke as well as to Albert Long. But I'm not sure that we're supposed to side with Duke there. I'm not sure that we're not supposed to side with Laura, and I'm a little confused about it. So should be discussed.
I do think, moral responsibility is not an absolute. It's an ambiguous area, I think. Bill, you go.
Yeah, I wasn't going to talk about that. I didn't consider her responsible, but I understand
Yeah.
But I considered that I understood why she thought she was responsible. I mean, everybody wants to control a situation like that, and that's one of the ways guilt and all that other kind of stuff makes somebody feel like they're in control or could have done something different. But the responsibility of the understudy, I think, comes into play here, And what are those responsibilities? Up to this point, Lee's understudy role has been kind of, it was a joke at first. And then Palace's role as an understudy is now coming into play in these 3 chapters. So what did that mean, and how does that happen? What's going on with that? I thought that this section I think it's on page in my book, it's on 17 on my Kindle version 177, where Joe and I nod as the girls sadly shake their heads. Was that his last performance? Snell asked. That night with you? funny how we never know. Uncle Wallace didn't go on stage thinking it would be his last night. When my last night came, I didn't know it either. My last time to play Emily, my last swim in the lake. I guess it was the shape he was in. He went home after he got out of the hospital back to Chicago. When I read that the first time, I thought, what's she talking about? Her last role, last time playing Emily, is going to be the last performance, right? So that's kind of telling us something else is going to happen.
Right.
And then the fact, see, I kind of am starting to look at her dad, or no, her husband, Joe, as being the stage manager of this whole story. He's the one that set the story into motion in the very beginning by revealing that relationship with Duke. And then every time it seems like it needs new momentum or new setting, Joe sets the stage again, you know? So his role as the stage manager is revealed to us. So it's not just director, it's stage manager in this. And I thought it was beautifully done. It just underscores why I think she's just a marvelous storyteller. Just this chapter alone, what she did with that stuff.
I want to just interject in a kind of personal note about responsibility. I'm always a person who thinks I can fix it.
Yes.
So when somebody is ill, I think Suzanne Mars, will fix this. But there are some situations that you come up against in life that cannot be fixed, and you hold yourself responsible in ways I think that are difficult. Yeah, I love that about the stage manager, Bill. Anything else about chapter 13? No English majors want to talk about Bartleby the Scrivener? No, Anna, you don't want to. I love the reference to Bartleby the Scrivener, having taught it many times. On page 185, this is Lee, and Bill was pointing us to this as well, that Lee, the understudy, he doesn't believe the show must go on. Then suddenly, as she's forgotten it, suddenly I remember. Joe told me this story long ago. I remember all of it. This is the best part. Lee just stares at him, and finally he says, I would prefer not to. Then he goes inside and closes the door. Bartleby, Nell shouts. He Bartleby'd him. Her sisters, smart women, both stare blankly. Bartleby the Scrivener, Nell says. Herman Melville, look it up. Okay, so yeah, I prefer not to. That abdication of responsibility, very clear abdication of responsibility.
I'm not an English major, but the line I really liked, I liked that whole section. I liked Joe's line right afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I should have read that too. Trust
Yeah.
me, it was unintentional on his part. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else in chapter 13? This is when Laura realizes that Uncle Wallace dies at age 56 and she's now 57. So that intimations of mortality are coming in here. Monica and then Cheryl.
Well, it's a small thing, but she actually forgets how old she is. She thinks she's 56, and her daughters remind her that she's 57. So again, we get this, she's not quite in time correctly here.
No. And also the fallibility of her memory, Oh yeah, Joe did tell me that story eons ago, but so that notion that the memory is a living thing here. Cheryl and then Harriet.
Either in this chapter or it was at the end of chapter 12. Joe is also correcting her memory at one point. It's in the last one of the last 2 pages. But I was just going to make a quick note on the racial climate of the time period in the 80s. And Jean, I don't know if we already talked about this. I had to step away. Did we talk about this?
No, we did not go.
Okay, so page 184, when Jean is at the front door and there's Emily says, I'm assuming there was a dynamic at work here. Black man, white woman, huge house, middle of the night. And then when Laura is reflecting on Palace's beauty, which might have been like a real insight for her in the late 70s, early 80s, that Black can be beautiful while brown and yellow and white are all beautiful. So I like that Patchett includes these little pieces in the novel with the time period.
Yeah, and that when Joe says, yes, there was a dynamic, all right. Yeah, in that scene of Jean showing up there. Yeah. And I like the bit about Palace as well. So now, Harriet.
I was thinking about Elise, Albert's second wife, who is in the hospital with Albert, and who thinks that Laura is having an affair with him when she says, "I didn't know he was married." That is, we've got womanizing as well as drinking, as part of this culture, and then the woman who is responsible in a way. He has a young wife who hasn't been contacted. The intake form hasn't been kept up to date, maybe at Tom Lake. She's the one, but we have a sense that she's the right one to have called, that she's the one who gets him to the major hospital in Chicago. Not that it will help. And then too, she shows, holds up the screen to show Laura the picture of Albert in an earlier time, and there he is. No picture of his own children, just those little orphan actors in his arms. That we're looking at a life which is spent in art versus a life that is spent in family, or the alternative that Laura represents.
Yeah. And I think here we have a clear example of someone taking responsibility who doesn't have to, but does take it, fulfills it for the sake of her children, and the whole question of family versus art here, which comes first, is being answered by the second wife, not the first and not the third, but the second wife. Yeah. All right. Anything else in chapter 13, or shall we move to 14? Let's move to 14. The girls go off to a movie, and Joe and Laura do the dishes and discuss why he stayed on as stage manager. And then we shift to the past and the cleaning out of Uncle Wallace's room and the discovery of his medicines and of the alcohol, and then on to rehearsals for Fool to Love and all the drinking. And then we have the past and present intersecting as Laura walks to the movie through the pear orchard and recalls issues with the pear trees and the girls, and recalls Emily wanting to see the promised man, and how she and Joe finally decided what to do, and that Emily saw it anyway. And then we have her watching the movie and responding to that and wanting to go home alone. So all of this going on in chapter 14. What are we to make of this chapter, and what do you think is going on here? Cheryl, is that you? Nope. Harriet? I see both of you. I just didn't know if you had your hands up or not. Monica, there we go.
I really love the opening of this chapter, beginning with "I'm 57, I'm 24." But then we also get, I love that the details of the scene. She and Joe are washing dishes, and she asks him, "Were you ever sorry?" He laughs. "We could be living in Los Angeles now. You could be on your third wife. Come dry." He holds out a towel to me. I love this, kind of imagining, let's think, stop for a minute and imagine the futures that could have been, while we're actually quite happy here, drying dishes in the kitchen together. And so again, a lot of this novel seems to be about the actual beauty of the domestic, not some sort of like romantic, hazy sort of thing of like, oh, the romanticism of the cherry orchard, but the actual what it is day to day to work in a cherry orchard, how much hard work it is, how much boring work like washing dishes is. But she seems to be taking all of them, at least she and Joe seem to be taking genuine pleasure in these small moments, domestic moments.
Yeah. We lost you, Monica. Did you have anything, something else?
That was it.
Okay, yeah. Harriet.
Well, so many things. But for one, I was just thinking about Fool for Love, because we've talked a lot about our town, and and Patchett has said there's nothing that she never wrote a line in this novel without our town. But Fool for Love seems to be very present too.
Right. Yeah.
Fool for Love is, Duke is Eddie in the way that she is Emily. That we've got this this character who is damaged and obsessed and passionate and self-absorbed and explosive, um, who is Duke. And I'm just, what I'm really thinking about is just the way in which, how wonderfully Patchett constructs this book on illusion. I do think of this across to Welty, because I think of Welty as somebody who writes her stories out of an amalgamation of genres, of putting things together that we have to think with many familiarities of conventions, of literary conventions from other places, and it's just going on here wildly. And then she makes up this movie, which is The Promised Man. I've been wondering about the title, but I am thinking about the segue between Uncle Wallace and Duke, so that we have in the moment of Duke stealing his pain medicine and finding the vodkas lined up like Russian soldiers in their freezer, and they're thinking he was a gin man or other, because otherwise the vodkas would be gone. But the next line is this would be as good a time as any to talk about alcohol. And now we're into Duke and verisimilitude during Fool for Love, and his wanting to drink a fifth of tequila in every rehearsal and performance in order to be true to the play. And I'm also thinking about his Duke's wanting Laura to drink as well, in the way that he's wanted her to smoke, that he's into this idea of introducing bad habits as to share as romantic, and that it'll make them better if Laura can just practice drinking and drink as well as he does.
Before we leave the first section, I do want to go back to where Laura asked Joe about why he stayed on as stage manager. I'll come back to Uncle Wallace, and he says, "I liked being on stage with you." And then she finally says,
"You were in love with me."
"Yeah, you were in love with me." And he shrugs, "I might have been," he says, so that we have that revelation in the beginning as well. And then we shift to the going through Uncle Wallace's room, and the parallels between Uncle Wallace and Duke are being set up, and the self-destructiveness of Duke is being emphasized, I think. Yeah. Monica.
Yeah, I want to follow up with a question about Harriet's comments, because I think they're important. I really appreciate, Harriet, your framing Dukes as wanting to that sharing bad habits can be romantic. Do you think he's seeing himself as corrupting or teaching or like helping her into adulthood? Like, how do you see that? Because I think it's a really interesting dynamic that you bring up.
Harriet?
Well, I think more than one person can answer that question, but I think my answer would be no. I think he means it as something to share. I think he thinks it is. Again, I'm thinking about this culture as a star culture, which is self-destructive, but is also about the excitement of it, the passion of it. I think he means it. I think he's charming when he says to her, "Why don't you learn to smoke so that we can lie on the beach and smoke?" And it will be from it's a seduction line. So no, I don't think it's corrupting.
I wonder though if it's not Duke's sort of total self-absorption. Anything I am, I want you to be, and also his control,
Mm-hmm.
the controlling of the young woman, the man in control. We'll do it my way. This is it, and so there's a Bill.
Yeah, I don't know about what his motivation was, Monica, but I think he probably instinctively knew that what he was doing was not healthy, shall we say, and that he wanted this. Probably his image of her was one of health and good sense, etc. She was kind of his Sebastian, anima, if you will. So he wanted her to follow along. Otherwise, it might not have been good. So I looked at this chapter as having three stories in it. The first story was about the beginning of Duke's, probably not the beginning of Duke's alcoholic drinking, but let's just say it's that. And then the second part was the winter here. She's talking about that story about her kids in the pear trees, not the cherry trees. The cherry trees start out in this story as pregnant with cherries, yearning to be released from that, And now she goes into this wintry tale about what do the pear trees represent in the winter, followed by that story of the promised man, what the promised man means. So here you have, the way I read it, Duke is now a crack addict, and so that's the logical end to what the path he's on, and it wins him an Academy Award. So, he's being praised for that, and as has already been pointed out by Suzanne, that he's a narcissist, and one can say all addicts are narcissists and completely self-absorbed, and they think they can do anything while they're in there until they get addicted. So it's just a very interesting structuring that she has to this chapter, and it's some of my favorite parts in this book are in this chapter. So anyway, those are my thoughts about it.
Thank you, Bill. Rachel?
Thank you. Along the same lines, Bill, I think that I'm picking up on something based off Harriet's recommendation. I listened recently to These Precious Days, and it's a wonderful audiobook. If you haven't tried that yet, it's Ann Patchett reading her essays aloud, which is really, really enjoyable. But in These Precious Days, there is one essay that is an adaptation of a speech Ann Patchett gave to the, I want to say it's the Association of Provosts of Colleges of Arts and Sciences. And she tells the story of her MFA experience and plays a lot with how when she was at Iowa, that myth of the suffering artist weighed so heavily on her training. And I think she gives it as a kind of like cautionary tale for other writing instructors that art doesn't have to mean suffering. But I see that a lot in this book, the not just in how she treats Duke's suffering for his art, but also how Laura falls into her art, right? And how the daughters in this story treat their various interests and goals as art without suffering. So I don't know if we have anything there to add, but I saw that relationship between her graduate school experience and the suffering artist and how it was coming through here in this story.
I think that's a definite link there too. Anna Maria?
Hi, yeah, I wanted to go back to the pear tree story because it's on page 200. She says to cross the naked pear orchard at night was to run the gauntlet of death, and I really liked that whole passage, but I wasn't sure how it fit in to the whole rest of the book.
Now, I'm thinking of the pear tree and that orchard as the mystery, the unknown future, the danger of living and having to face that kind of mystery, and so I've seen it in those terms. Yeah, Harriet. We can't hear you, Harriet.
Oh, I was going to say that the pear trees are imagination, and imagination turned so that when this whole community looks at those pear trees, they're seeing acres of murderous psychopaths emboldened by darkness. It's an image of fear, and she's going to come back to it at the end of the chapter when she doesn't want to walk through that was the girls talking about Duke's performance. But the idea, I had the same question. That is, how is it connected? And I think it is got to do again with this thread of passion, art, imagination, and both its the way in which the things it creates, things it can create.
I think not just imagination, though, but going to Tom Lake, having a wonderful romance, and where that leads. The destruction, you don't know ahead of time. What does the future hold? What terrors are out there? And then imagining the terrors is worse than perhaps not imagining them. Yeah. So let's look at the passage Harriet was talking about. If we take it on 204 and 205, when Duke at the end of before we do that, let's talk about the movie, and then we'll look at this passage. Why the title, The Promised Man? So she makes up a title for this movie, and it's The Promised Man. Why do you think that happens? And the plot of the movie. Anyone want to speculate about the title? Bill, you were talking about that. What do you think?
Wow, that's a great question. I had to go back and look at the title. I had heard in my mind "Promised Man," and
Right.
then it's The Promised Man, and so Duke gave a lot of promises, I would say, in some regards, implied or otherwise, about the relationship he was going to have with Sebastian, with Lara, and even with Palace, I would think. And he was almost always breaking them. And then you could look at it as he himself had tremendous talent and promise as an actor, and as being able to portray real human emotion. And his way of actually portraying that emotion led him into addiction in this movie. I don't know if it led him into addiction in life yet. I haven't gotten that far. But so promised always implies something about the past to me, not the future.
So it's the past tense. It's not that Duke is making promises. It's not Duke's promises, but he is in the title character, the promised man.
Yeah.
That's an odd. And it evokes the phrase "the promised land." The promised land.
I did look at. I read "Fool for Love," and I thought about those plays, as being bookends for American imagination, if you will. One is about the West, one is about the East, one is about a small town that holds all kinds of promises, and it's nostalgic. And then you have the West you would think it would have more promise than the other, but it's about absolute corruption, if you will, of the relationship between siblings. So, yeah, it's an interesting choice of place that she has in this book.
I've been sort of thinking of it as if he's the promised man, he has all of this promise. He's the promise of fulfillment and joy and pleasure and talent and artistry, but he's not. He never. It's the irony that what has been promised doesn't find its way into fulfillment, I think. Now, Harriet?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this promised man. That is, I was stumped at first, and I went through promise and promised land. But then I thought, a promised man is a man who is betrothed. I'm thinking about the film now, and the language of her description of the film. He loves his wife, his two beautiful daughters. His family doesn't know he's lost his job. They don't know how much he's been drinking. He's trying to maintain his denial for as long as he can. Um, um, and I'm skipping now to a few pages to the woman projected up on the sheet has sold Duke crack. He has lost his job, but he still has his family. He is an alcoholic, but he still has his family and they love him. They would gladly reach down into the darkest hole and use all their strength to pull him up, but he doesn't go to them. He goes to this woman instead. And I'm thinking that that maybe answers for me the idea of the promised man, that he has a promise to his family, but he goes to this other woman who is not going to save him, who is going to move him into further into addiction. And so I'm just thinking about promise as betrothed or committed to, and the question of what Duke is committed to, and it sounds very much like the choice that Lara has had to face, which is to stay in the world of art or to move towards family. And her answer and solution has been family. Bill's got his hand up again.
Yeah, go, Bill.
Sorry. Yeah, I don't want to step on anybody else wanting to talk, but she was really worried seeing him using crack in that movie because she knew exactly what he was doing. He was using crack in that movie.
Yeah.
And he was getting the perfect shot. And that perfect shot included having, on all those rehearsals, he was using crack. Maybe somebody can withstand that one time, two times. How many times can they withstand the call of crack cocaine after they've ingested it once, So she saw it, and I know she was terrified for him.
I wonder, let me read that passage because it's really a powerful passage. So right after, when Harriet stops, he goes to this woman instead. And when he is back in his car, we realize that things are much worse than we had understood. He has a pipe and he lights it, and when the flame pulls down, we can see the drug hit him, the color draining from his face, his nose and eyes streaming, and then the look of relief that breaks over him, a violent gratitude, like he wasn't sure it would come for him this time, and it came. I want someone to tell me how that was acting. I want someone to tell me how many people were on the set and how many of them understood what was happening. They had to wait until the golden hour when the light was perfect because there could be only one take. He couldn't do this thing twice. I wonder if Sebastian was there, but he couldn't have been. Sebastian would never have let that happen. All these years later, I feel like I let it happen. I didn't refuse to drink, though I knew what drinking was doing to him. I didn't pour out the tequila and replace it with water. I didn't walk Uncle Wallace off the stage. It's nothing but foolish self-aggrandizement, I know. No summer girlfriend ever changed the course of a movie star's life. But still, I'm sorry I didn't try. Yeah. So that whole question of responsibility, to what extent am I culpable? And the fact that he has done that, she sees the destruction. Yeah, it's real. Harriet.
It's also this theory of verisimilitude that Duke has had. She says when she remembers going to the film the first time with Joe, she said, we never considered the movie might destroy us. But was it because we knew him, or would anybody be destroyed by that? Both. But what I felt was I had seen Duke's end. And it's not that we don't know if Duke is already addicted. We don't know if he's going to become addicted. But we do know that he's willing for his art to move into verisimilitude in a way that doesn't make sense to her. That's not acting. Someone tell me how that was acting. But so we're getting Duke's history by indirection here. Monica's got her hand up.
Yep, Monica.
Well, Suzanne, it was interesting when you were reading that line about it's nothing but foolish self-aggrandizement and no summer girlfriend ever changed the course of a movie
Mhm.
star's life. We've been talking about how narcissistic and self-centered Duke and movie stars are. It's interesting to see this contrast of like Laura is engaged in intentional self-reflection, especially here, but throughout the rest of the novel, I just realized what an interesting contrast that sets up.
I think that's right. This whole novel is a statement about of Laura reflecting on her life and trying to come to terms with her own identity, a kind of self-reflection that neither Duke nor Uncle Wallace seem to be capable of. Yeah. Let's go to the last chapter, shall we?
Mhm.
The tennis chapter. Um, so in chapter 15, we have at the present, they are up the next morning and they don't want to discuss the movie. Joe is aware that Laura may have been there. They discuss Joe as the stage manager, the trustworthy stage manager who smells like cherries. And then we have the past. Sebastian arrives. Fools for Love rehearsal is suspended. They go to play tennis. Laura ruptures her Achilles tendon, and then the girls talk about it. And then we go back to the past, and Duke asks Sebastian to take Laura to the hospital, and he does, and they turn this into a kind of joke between them. Monica.
I don't have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Monica. Bill.
Yeah, just at the very beginning there where Maisie's talking about Happy, and Happy is circling around and stumbling around in a circle. And then Laura asks, Happy's dizzy. And in some regards, I kind of felt like I'm happy in this novel. I'm circling around as
Yeah.
more and more is revealed. And am I dizzy or am I having a stroke?
Yeah.
But but I just thought that was a nice little thing about just that part of the chapter.
What else about this not final chapter, chapter 15, the final one for today? John, I'm sure you have something to say, don't you, John Hennigan? I got you I can't hear you, John. I guess I might have to let John off the hook because I can't hear him here. Oh. Still can't hear you. Okay. Anyone else want to talk about?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. Good.
Okay. One thing I like about the chapter is the way her presenting, and it's at the top of 208, that when you're in a play and you're on stage, the audience isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And she just does a wonderful job, I think, not only tying in our town, but also tying in acting and what it means to play a role. And she does it throughout, the book. But it really comes through here to me with those kind of lines. And for one thing, that this chapter's I think the first time she ever talks about, and maybe it's a chapter earlier, she just finally talks about Duke as a boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a very different way to portray him than when we initially hear that he's so obsessed with making notes of his character. And then I can't remember what the second thing was. And then he actually burns himself with a cigarette. And
Yeah.
That, whenever I read that, I think of Howard Hunt in Watergate,
Mm-hmm.
That's really sick. And that's not anywhere in our town, that would be something like that. But and she refers to herself as a girlfriend of Duke's, not something more intimate. But the climax to it's curious to me about her consumption of the alcohol is going to lead to her playing the best tennis that she's ever played in her life. And then that's what leads to what's going to change her world, because she's not going to be able to act. And all these other people are going to come in. And to me, this is a real turning point in the book.
Yeah, and Nell is the one who realizes that. This is the end of her career as an actress. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Bill,
it's great how two of the daughters don't understand that, but Nell does.
Right. Nell,
And-
the actress, understands. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill, did you have something? I'm just no. I'm wondering here. The whole business is she goes to play tennis. Why does she play tennis? Why does she play tennis? Because Duke wants her to. She and Palace want to go swimming. She said we could go swimming, but we wouldn't think of doing it because our boyfriends wouldn't do it. So they're part of that sort of culture. We do what our boyfriends want. Laura.
Well, I felt a little bit like Bill mentioned, like the dog going around in circles, and dizzy a little bit in this chapter because of the end of her career. I mean, I this is my first time reading. I don't know what's coming, but I felt like I wasn't sure. We only are hearing from her. There's some implication that it does seem like the director is also frustrated with how the rehearsals are going for Fool for Love. But we get a lot of external confirmation about how good she is as Emily. And so I find it so, I'm curious with what objectivity we have. Like, are we supposed to believe her that she really was and could only play Emily, the sort of end of her career? It's the tennis accident that seems to bring it on, but it also, I don't want to say that it felt like a relief in some way in this scene where it's like something else came along and was like, okay, I don't, it's better the career ended because maybe the only thing I could do was Emily. And I keep thinking of how Joe, I think it's when they were in the kitchen, he corrects her and says, you were good, you are good. And
she at one point says it might be a lack of courage rather than a lack of talent. So
I don't know whether I believe her or not.
Yeah.
I feel dizzy in that sense. Like I don't know whether to believe her.
Right. Yeah, I think it is ambiguous. Bill and Harriet.
Well, I saw Melissa had her hand up there for a bit. I didn't know if she wanted to say something.
Go.
I think I was just going to say, just speaking to this idea of what Laura's point of not believing. I'm curious. I wish we could know the stories that she's told these girls about this experience before now. It's hard for me to believe that they would know Joe is a stage manager, but then not know that Joe is the director, but then he doesn't play the stage manager, that the end of her career comes, but they don't know how it comes. Some of these things start to be like, how do they know some parts of the story and not parts of the other? So I do also feel like you're sort of spinning in the history of how the story has been told over time.
Yeah, written into that is this ambiguity. Harriet and Bill, did you want to go first?
It doesn't make a difference to me. I just short stuff here. Joe as the stage manager, and this is starting to be kind of where I see it. They have 3 older children. It has to be set during COVID. And it's a story that has to be told to all of them at one time. It can't be told this piece to this one and that piece to the other one. So the setting is perfect. And he seemed to understand that, and perhaps they, like my kids were never that interested in my career. And, so they might never have been interested in their mother's career or their father's career. It's always a just so story. Oh, these things happened just because we are now in the world, and Yeah, they've always been in love. Nobody was ever there other than Joe or Laura, mom or dad, you know. So now's the time for these real stories, the real story to start coming out. That's how I read this story.
Harriet and then Monica. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Duke playing tennis, and it not going well. That is, the drinking has made him a better actor during the performance, but now it turns out that an afternoon swim and game of tennis register differently when the morning is spent drinking tequila. So he vomits again, his hands braced against his knees, black hair wet, clinging to the sides of his face. He won't move off the hard court. I can see, he says, I can see how this could really help in the long run. And Palace says, oh, fantastic. Now you're bulimic on top of everything else. So I'm thinking about, Duke putting things together for what he wants. And I'm thinking about that in terms of Laura and her tennis game. That is, I too wanted to talk about girls and guys, and the way in which Palace and Laura look at each other, and she looks at Palace for help silently, and their decision to not go swim because they're going to be with the guys. But I'm also thinking about whether this tennis game, which is the best that Laura has ever played, and she's loose and she's great, and she gives it everything, and she gets hurt. And I'm just thinking about, is that an accident? Or is this too something that she shouldn't have done? No, just having seen Duke vomiting on the tennis court, that is, I'm thinking about.
I would say doing what Duke wants is her Achilles heel, so to speak, and she ruptures her Achilles tendon at this very moment. So she has brought it on herself, it seems to me, by.
And does she want to bring it on? I mean, it's another question.
I don't know that. Yeah.
Nell says, you're not getting it. This is where everything changes. This is the beginning of the second act. She can't walk. And then Duke pats her in the memory. Duke pats her on the head, asks his brother if he could drive me to the hospital. Duke and Palace wouldn't be able to come with us. Of course, they had to get cleaned up. They had to be on stage in a couple of hours. I'm thinking it's the end of the relationship as well as the end of the performance. And I'm just thinking that, she has said, I was a first-rate Emily. I was not a first-rate actress. That's what she's discovered by playing May. But maybe it's also that she is finished with this. There are a lot of.
I don't think you can bring on an Achilles tendon rupture purposely, but you can put yourself in danger when she's done that. Yeah, Monica.
I'm really struck by when her daughters say, how did we never know this? And Maisie sees the scar on her leg and says, how have I never seen this before? And she says, I've had this scar a lot longer than I've had any of you. It's interesting to think, first of all, her daughters are young enough that anything bad enough to have left a scar on her daughter, she's probably aware of. But it's interesting to think of the scars that your parents have that you don't know about. And especially, what wonderful symbolism of a scar on your Achilles tendon. And since Bill said that about the Just So stories, it occurs to me, this is kind of a version of the Arabian Nights, right? She's parsing out these stories to her daughter, part of the family, to keep them young, to keep them her daughter, or something like that.
Yeah. The whole storytelling motif is a really interesting one. Yeah. I also think that what the Duke's response here, Duke and Palace had to get suited up. Duke didn't. Duke has an understudy. There is an understudy. Palace is the understudy. She can't go, but Duke could go, but he chooses not to. He sends Sebastian. And so it's his abdication of responsibility. He could go with her. He's caused it. But he takes no responsibility, it seems to me. Monica, did you have something else? Did I cut you off there? No? Anything else about this chapter? Chapter 13, 15. We've got 5 minutes, I think.
Well, the way that you put it just then, it sounds like Duke was Bartlebying himself.
Yeah, I prefer not to. Yeah. He's like he's the opposite of Lee. I prefer to go on. Yeah. What about Nell? Why is Nell the perceptive daughter here when she realizes what's going on? And why do Maisie and Emily miss it? Yeah, Harriet?
They accuse her, if I'm remembering this right, of doing it again, thinking about the performance and not her mother lying on the ground. And there's identification between Nell and her mother in this moment. The COVID is a parallel for her to what is happening with her having to drop out of the performance because of the injury. But it's just interesting that the girls are not taking sides on the same issues that we're talking about. There are doubles, and they're taking sides on responsibility or these questions.
And here's Emily taking up for her mother. Let's worry about our mother on the ground, not worrying about Duke at this point. Yeah. And Nell thinking of her own career, possibly stifled by COVID, and identifying with her mother. But her mother is not grief-stricken at the loss of her career, as you say. In a way, it seems to be welcome, an end to the career. I would choose you three every time, she said earlier. All right. Anyone want to have the last word here? Last comments? Anna, we're going to give them to you then.
Guys hear me? Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I think that if nobody else has the last thing to say, we do have about 3 more minutes. Time for maybe one more comment. I did want to draw everyone's attention to Melissa's great comments in the chat. I love what she said about how it seems like Laura is playing the fool for love, that Patchett is being on the nose in a few incidences, like she's the fool for love when she's in love with Duke, but she cannot play the fool for love there on the stage. And so I think that those were really insightful comments there in the chat box. If there's not anything else that anybody would like to add, then we will plan to see you guys again next week on Monday at noon for the next 3 chapters.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys.